Hello there, dear listeners, and welcome to Red Moon Roleplaying and this post-mortem for our KULT Divinity Lost campaign, A Hole in My Heart. Joining me today is, as always, Craig. How are you doing, sir?
I'm very good, thank you. Very good indeed.
That is very good to hear. And Hjalmar, you too are here, I hope.
Sup. I'm rolling in the depths of anguish.
As you often are. Well, what we are here, of course, to do today is to look back on this somewhat short campaign, but still, of KULT Divinity Lost that we put together. It was very much based on your chosen archetypes, your dark secrets and your disadvantages, and through that we built this little story set in the lovely town of Corvallis, Oregon. And I was thinking we could start by asking the question of, how did you feel when we started the campaign? Maybe starting with you, Hjalmar.
Yeah, this was a very fun campaign to play, and I feel like the role of Dr. Jermaine Christensen that I played, it was like lots of different pieces put together from my own life, people around me, and things that I felt like I wonder how this would experience as I was throwing myself into, like, I want to study to be a doctor. I would love to have a family at some point. I would not love to do strange experiments on baboons and taking their hearts to be my daughter's heart. But that aside, a lot of the things were just like, okay, this is something that I would like to experiment with for a character, because this is something I'm curious about in my real life. Then am I gonna be Dr. Christensen? I don't know, but yeah, that was like the main idea for the character, and as we started it, I feel like I've talked a lot of random things now, but yeah, how I felt about like starting the campaign. I felt like it was a very nice getting into it. As always, we kind of a easy start. You know, you have a nice, happy family life feel with the wife, with the daughters, with the little small things that might not go completely as you want to. With one of the daughters not listening to you, stuff like that. And I like that. I don't know if. I suppose that's because I created the idea for the character to be fairly happy, just with the sort of the complication of one of the daughters having a failing heart. But I liked how you did that. I liked how you eased into that, and I also appreciated this time that me and Craig were kind of friends, kind of on good footing with each other. Wanted to spend more time together, the family loves him. He helped my charity out. It's a very, very, very comfortable and kind of happy start. Just before you started easing me into this sense of urgency, I guess, with okay, you gotta your co-doctor, I suppose, Dr. Whitehead. She's acting weirdly and she's drunk, and then it kind of took off from there, I feel.
Yes, indeed. And of course, that was very much the intention to first of all make sure that we grounded Dr. Christensen in a somewhat like a happy family situation, that this was what he wanted to protect. This is what he was working so hard to protect, and what he was willing to do a lot to make sure that he would be able to have in the future as well. So I felt like it was very important that we gave you quite a lot of time initially to help sort of paint the picture of just how happy you were, and just what an awful situation it must be to be then knowing that, well, yes, but this is only a time-limited thing. Your daughter it doesn't have many years left, and what will happen to the family then? That was the intention there very much, and I'm glad to hear that was appreciated. I think, like when you do horror, it's a really good idea to start out by actually grounding it, because if you start out with the spooky stuff immediately, then it'll be tough to feel like there are any stakes, right? Because it's all weird from the beginning. But
and also like misery, I suppose, in that way, because you could have a character that has done a lot worse for himself than a doctor has moved to Corvallis and has a family. But even in that case, you'd want to start pointing out like what friends do they have? What are the sort of bright points in their lives? But thinking about this makes me like, okay, next up at some point I'm gonna do. Let's start with a completely miserable character and take it from there.
Well, we've had that in some of the other campaigns we've done, of course. You know, I played a veteran who was an alcoholic and a drug addict with PTSD. You know, and I mean, that's not a particularly a bright place to start. And now he still had hope for the future. So I think you can still, if you then use that hope and use the familial connections that he was looking for his brother, as long as you sort of provide something for them to be fighting for, and that it's not just all bleak darkness and nothing to fight for, then it can still work, I think. And in the case of Dr. Christensen, yeah, he really had the perfect life to fight for, which is, I suppose, why he did as much as he did. But let's move on to Craig. So what about you? How did you feel when we started, and about Mr. Coleman and how we introduced him into this campaign?
Interesting. I feel compared to Hjalmar, my answer is far less poetic, because Hjalmar's is like, oh, this cool character exploring my life, and I'm just like, oh, I just fought Descendant, haven't played that. let's make a Descendant character with a cool inherited backstory, which I was intrigued by, and we got to see a little of that, and it was fun. Again, maybe it was a bit too big for this story. Like, I feel we didn't really have time for both characters' stories to be... I felt Dr. Christian's story was far more relevant and to the point, like, and engrossing with the NPCs, while mine was a bit more, mysterious background, which no one really knows about. But, you know, I got to throw in some fun things about his house, and yeah, I guess that was Daniel Coleman. I don't know if... I was trying to think of how many cult characters I've actually made, because I also run so many games. And also so many games I played, we've had preset characters. I think Daniel Coleman's my 5th. So that would be the 2 Carver twins, my young boy, of course, who went to the spooky house, the spooky orphanage, and Judas Grail, weird writer guy. Yeah, so I haven't made loads, but I made a couple. Daniel, I think he needed a bit more time. I think I only maybe got a grasp of who he was in the last session, maybe just before. But he was interesting, and we got, because I think also his initial story was so nice. Just a happy, rich dude having quite a nice time, and even when poor Dr. Christensen had some of that initial drama, my drama was like, oh, there might be something happening very far away. I kind of told my guy, like, deal with it. Deal with it. But yeah, he was intriguing, and it was nice to have that element of having items and having resources at my disposal.
How did you feel about Elizabeth being introduced there? Because there was an intention, like looking at the character, I felt like you had all these things, you had all these artifacts and all these business things that you were doing, but what was somewhat lacking really was that sort of human connection, that there wasn't really anyone for you to care about. And what I figured was that it would be quite good to try to introduce that, and to that was one of the things I hoped to sort of handle as part of your story, was this sort of choice between, you know, on the one hand, of course, living up to this duty that you have to your family to do that and to protect these assets that you have, but maybe is that something that truly brings you joy, or is, you know, finding someone to share this with, and actually putting yourself out there, putting your whole self out there for someone else to be with. Is that something that would make you more happy? That was one of the things I wanted to hopefully explore through that character.
Yeah, I definitely think we did. Again, maybe mainly in the last session, but then when it did come, it was a good, interesting choice, and it was and also due to Hjalmar's fun, like you want to be with Elizabeth, but maybe that, and Matthias always came with like, oh yeah, you damn right you do, but maybe you'll lose everything, and it was like, no. So he definitely suddenly had a bit of a fun dilemma on his hands, which obviously in the end I chose against. I chose the duty, but what can I say?
But I like that how you you embraced that dramatic hook that I gave you, and okay, let's work with this, and it doesn't need, like we talked a little bit about in the Patreon edits of that. We talked a little bit about those kinds of hooks. They only need to be a start of something. It's like it's not like the hook I'm giving you is like you'll never talk to her again kind of thing.
So I definitely think we found something by the end. But yeah, I think initially I wasn't entirely sure, because it does take me a while to get into when I make it. I think sometimes I'm better at, in shorter adventures, taking the pre-mades, because then you just have a lot of stuff already, like for example in The Shunned or in Tapestry of Suburbia. Oh, the Tapestry of Suburbia was a bit interesting, because there we had presets, but also they were still created by us. Like we were given some prompts and roles, which... and of course, again, sleepers, which I think also sometimes are a bit easier to initially just be like, I'm a normal guy. Well, here it was like, ooh, cool dagger. But yeah, Daniel Coleman, an interesting one. And again, it was also nice to have that initial bit of friendship as well with Dr. Christensen. Only maybe sabotaged again by me being a bit of a weird loner. But I had reasons. I was worried the ghosts of my house would kill your children.
I feel like there is almost a theme there of distance, of keeping things at arm's reach, like a little bit away from you. The whole, all the business that you didn't want to deal with, and the artifacts are like, what are they really? It's this being uncomfortable about anything being too close at heart. It's really.
It's almost as if he was trying to fill a hole in his heart.
The hole in my heart! Yes! No, and I regret, listeners, that I only, in the last session, just as Matthias was finishing, I realised, oh my god, that would have made perfect sense. I should have said something like, I chose to, now there's always going to be a hole in my heart. Maybe it was cheesy, but it just came to me like, actually, that's a good way of linking in my metaphorical hole, and then of course poor Dr. Christensen's daughter's literal hole.
And one of the things I wanted to try to do with Mr. Coleman was also to try to introduce the idea that being a rich person ethically is not something that's necessarily all that easy. So that's why I was introducing the fact that you're running this cobalt mine in the Congo, which, is famous for employing, tons of child labor, and there's the thing, for example, that you were sort of approving was basically a bribe to the M23 rebel group, which is a real thing that do really, really bad things over in that country, to try to sort of also paint the fact that these artifacts, of course, that you're collecting, it comes back to the whole idea of, these artifacts that are coming from all over the world. Why are you sort of hoarding them in your little collection over here? Is that really, is that really good or not,
I think it was very much like you in the past yourself, Matthias, said, like, sometimes you're trying to play nice characters who maybe aren't nice, but they're trying. And I think I was riffing off that a little. I was like, I'm going to try. Like, he himself considers himself a nice, rich philanthropist, but maybe that doesn't come without darkness. Oh, so it's KULT, and I have, like, a freaking weird haunted house with a creepy dagger in it, so...
But yeah. I think it's also like we're all heroes in our own story, right? So whether Mr. Coleman sort of really reflects on that or not doesn't really matter. Maybe it's also how would the listeners take that? And so I think it being there, even if Mr. Coleman doesn't necessarily start to reflect on is what I'm doing right or not, the listeners, of course, will get a picture of Mr. Coleman because of that. And in the same way they got a picture of Dr. Christensen because of the experiments that he was conducting, which, depending on how you view, like, how we should take care of other sentient beings.
And in a way, I felt that I was trying to reach out to Dr. Christensen as the sort of like, Dr. Christensen, he is a good man. And in a way, helping him was my like, I definitely am doing good by helping him. And I find it interesting that, feel free to tell me what you thought, Hjalmar, because I did notice towards the end, you were saying, wow, Coleman's actually a really nice guy, and he's helping me, wow. So maybe in a weird way we both saw good in the other person that maybe was, well, I'd say misguided, but, maybe not the whole truth.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like there's there's a big theme of good intentions there as well, but also that what you're saying now is almost two people kind of validating each other, because that you are like, you want my validation in a way, because you have an image of me being a doctor, me helping other people, and I want your money. No, but I want your friendship and like the whole thing, because you feel like a sincere, nice person that and having nice people around you must mean that you're nice and good yourself, right?
Yeah, I was really looking forward to having the scene where I actually went, hang on a minute, this is really awful, Doctor, what you're doing to these monkeys. Because I was like, I didn't realize from the start how little you knew about my my experiments, I suppose. Nothing.
My research.
I knew nothing. I was like, he's helping kids with their heart problems.
No,
How can
exactly.
that be bad?
Help saving lives. It's noble research to be doing, for sure. That's a little bit about that. But then, in terms of the journey that you went through, I mean, what would you say, Hjalmar, on the journey that Dr. Christensen went through? How was that?
I feel like it went from a journey of, like, I can't tell when obsession really came into the picture, but I feel like it did at some point. I don't know if it was already a little bit from the start, but he wanted obviously to help his daughter, and I really enjoyed how we were kind of dancing around that, because I wasn't able to do any of that. My work was put on hold. We're just doing these kind of fundraising events, and nothing is actually happening in that regard. And then we have the strange event with the kayaks, and where we first get sort of swept away from our space and time, or how would you call it? Like, where everything, the strangeness come into it. And I can almost feel that ignited some sort of escapism in the character, because now I think the Doctor was so obsessed with getting his work to conclude, or continue at least, that then when he got something else, and I think it was a role. It was just this role of keeping it together. And I looked at this, you become obsessed with something. And I hadn't looked at that for a while, because I feel like usually it's easier to just take angry, sad, scared, or guilt-ridden, all these things. But obsessed thing I hadn't had for a while. And it's also a little bit funnily written in the rule book, because it says that you take a +1 relation to something. And that to me is a bit strange, because a +1 relation with something means that when you're near, when it's a person, for example, when you're near them, you're spending time with them, that means you are lowering, you're regaining stability from being with them. And so when you become obsessed with an event where there's not necessarily a person there, how does that work with a +1 relation? So I was like, I've been wanting to explore that one, and it just became like a nice time to do it. But I just took that thing aside, the regaining stability, which somehow, now that I'm talking about it, it completely makes sense, because when you become obsessed with something, then that is what's going to keep you stable, working with that in a way. So, and technically, if I took a +1 relation to, I don't know, that building that we were in, or what the mystery of the cloth, like whenever I work with that, I regain stability, then of course that's going to be a priority for the character to work on those things in a way. But I enjoyed what that became, and how the whole scenario ends with me like being completely convinced now that that's going to be the way forward. Whatever mystery that holds, that's what's going to help this. That's where I'm going to find this real heart. I thought actually that you were going to end it there. I didn't think that it would come to a real conclusion with me finding the girl and having to make that decision, and then how it would be after that. And even now, talking about it, I'm like, what actually... what was the final thing that happened when we were sitting there at the back and she was playing and it was fine? But what was it that wasn't fine?
If we talk a little bit about the end there for Dr. Christensen, then one of the main things that I wanted to also bring up there, and this is one of those things that was going on in the background constantly, but I never wanted it to be sort of the main focus of it. But of course, what has happened is that the election has happened, and we all know that when that happens next year, whoever wins, it's going to be a bad situation for quite a while, and it might turn out really, really bad depending on what happens, because of the situation that the country is in. And I really wanted to play on this idea that Elysium is kind of tearing itself apart, and that's one of the reasons why Gaia is actually more and more able to sort of intrude upon it. Like, we are tearing down our society by turning on each other. And the idea, like, one of the things that's at play there is this idea that the city was on fire just a few days ago, presumably in that scenario, and society is not fine. Nothing has been fixed there. So there's this dark cloud that's hanging over everything. But then there's also the personal situation for Dr. Christensen because of what you did. I mean, you saved Cadence, your Cadence. But in order to do that, you actually had to murder the actual Cadence. Like your actual flesh and blood daughter. You had to murder her and to take her heart. And she woke up right before she died. And that, living with that, like thinking about how to deal with something like that, my image, and of course, you are going to be the final sort of arbiter of what is true or not with regards to how Dr. Christensen feels about it. But my impression would be that would be something that would be very, very difficult to deal with, and something that you would have to process for a very, very long time, and you'd have to really ask yourself, was it worth it or not? So that was a little bit what I was implying there. That yes, it's happy, it's nice, but there's a lot of stuff under the surface that's not fine.
Yeah, and I like that you chose there to make the rest of Cadence very much like my daughter and very much real. So even if she was a copy, it's not like the rest of the body was slowly starting to fall apart, or that she's started saying strange things or anything else. It was like that was my little girl, and that was the picture of it right there. So
yeah, you fixed her. You were able to put her back together. She said that, right? She said that she was broken, but you fixed her. So you did that. So she's fine. Of course, she is, depending on how you want to look at it, from the cult, mythology, she's not a real person. She does not have a soul, but she's your daughter, and she is the one that you've raised, and she has all the same personality that your Cadence has, and presumably she will be exactly the same person that Cadence would have been if she had not gotten lost in the forest and been taken by Gaia. So you saved her, but to do that, you had to do some pretty messed up stuff. But it was a real choice that you had there, like what to do. You could, I personally foresaw like there being, around 3 different choices roughly. Like you could either like just leave it and just say, look, whatever happens here happens. She's in the forest there. I taking her would be a violation in a sense also, because she had a new life over there, presumably some kind of new family. It was a little bit left unclear. That would have been one choice, to let nature take its course. And another one would have been to actually take that Cadence, let your Cadence pass, and take back the real one, so to speak. But as you can imagine, that's also something that would have had quite a lot of consequences, because you don't really know her. She doesn't really know you anymore. And living with that, and what would that have done to the family? That would have also been very, very interesting to explore. But you didn't choose that. You chose to save the one that you had raised. And I think that hopefully says a little bit about how we view family, because that was the theme, right? Is what is actually family? Is it flesh and blood? Is it time? Is it the memories that we share? going into things like, adopted children and everything. Like, what is it really that matters? And at the end of the day, I think that the choice that Dr. Christensen made was very clear there. And was it the right choice or not? It's difficult to say, but I don't think there is a right choice in that situation.
No. And it's fun because somehow the idea of letting everything be, and well, Caden's heart will run out. This little girl has a new life in the woods. Some things must end. Caden's will die, and I'll let the other one be. That didn't even exist as a choice. It's like I haven't even considered it as a player that I could just leave things as they are. It's like,
you could have.
Yeah. But it feels, and same with the monkey. I could have decided that I suddenly felt immense regret when I found it there in the student campus. I'm like, okay, maybe it's time I hand this over to a place that will actually take care of it now, and things will have to go as they go. But there was like, no, it was only the what cadence should I have in my life?
Mm-hmm.
That was the only question.
Yeah, and I mean, I think that makes perfect sense. The idea of, as a parent, to let your child die if you have any chance at all of saving them. I could never fathom that. I would do a lot. I would go very, very far. And I think most parents would, So, there's nothing strange about that choice, actually. So,
I found it interesting that I didn't even consider that idea.
It would have been, if you think about it, it would have been a very sort of easy one to explain in a way. You wouldn't have had to do anything really sort of dark in that situation. What would have happened is basically, well, Cadence had a bad heart. She died. It was very sad, of course. But it was kind of what was expected to happen in a way. It was always a long shot that you were going to be able to save her, right? But as a family, of course, you couldn't give up. In some ways, it would have been the easiest one to live with. You wouldn't have had to get your hands dirty, so to speak, in that case. But at the same time, yeah, could you really live with that? That would also have been a very difficult choice to make.
Yeah, I think somewhere in the campaign, I realized that I was had a huge need for control and be the one that decided events and things, and in the line with that, it feels like I had to be the one. Make ruling over this person's life in a way.
Yes, indeed, and you did. If we go to Mr. Coleman,
just depressing, just sadness. We had the lure of happiness, and you threw it at me, and it was like, oh, maybe you can be friends with Christians, maybe everything will work out okay. Maybe Elizabeth, you know what, she fucking loves you, and then it was like, oh. Maybe you can give up absolutely everything, including even the wealth and isolation. Now that goes too. Now you're just going to be a weird person skulking around, killing people all the time.
But saving the world while you're doing that.
Yeah. No, my character, utter misery, utter depression, and the rest of his life will be spent trying to get out of it, because how could this be forever? And he'd probably either die or find a way. Maybe he'd find a way one day. It'll probably involve selling his soul or killing 10,000 people or something, but because that would be the rest of his life, wanting to get back to just having a life. Especially because, the dagger was important to him, but he also considered everything important, all the things. And also I like to imagine that the house, then obviously gets probably just sold off to someone, and then they come and find this freaking haunted house full of horrors. Or probably rebel against them. There's another cult story there, the Coleman house. What happened next? Yes.
Yeah, when it comes to the haunting, I tried to sort of downplay that part a little bit, just because I felt like what the haunted house in of itself, that can sort of be its own complete story, really, that you can make around that one. What I felt would fit better with what we were doing here with the theme of family was really to look at. You have, of course, the artifact. You have this duty that your family has. You're fulfilling this promise that your family has presumably done at some point in the past, to be the sort of custodians of this artifact that keeps this really, really important machine going. presumably it has been entrusted to you as mortals so that you will be able to keep it hidden, basically, because Gaia most likely won't be able to get at it in that case. Now, being resourceful as Mother Nature is, she has found a way of manifesting in Corvallis, in Elysium, through these doppelgangers, these changelings that she's taking, and they're of course trying to find you, and they finally end up actually locating Mr. Coleman, and that's when the things really get bad. So before then, you had all these, you were waking up with blood in your bed and things like that, and that was sort of the haunting that I wanted to play up, which was the idea of the artifact taking control and you fulfilling your duty. You were kind of out there preventively taking down these agents that were looking for the artifact. But then they found you, and then it became very, very difficult to continue to have all these things in this sort of firm location. But you still, of course, had a duty to do, and that's sort of where this choice came in then of, well, you could just not do your duty. I mean, if you didn't do it, what would happen, really? Like,
yes, exactly. Well, I mean, obviously some bad things, but also maybe happiness.
Yes, exactly.
Family. Maybe. And I think that's what happened, and he chose not poorly, he chose what he thought was right, and that's the end of him, and his future's probably quite... Yes, I suppose we have Dr. Christensen, where he did a horrible thing, but I don't know, I kind of felt he's gonna be like, it's fine. Like, I feel like down the years, you're going to be completely Christian. I felt the real Christensen behind he's a lovely doctor was actually, he's a kind of crazy obsessive who will do anything to achieve his goals. So I think for him, he was like, I'll get over that. I will compartmentalize that and I'll be fine. And maybe in the future, the next time it happens, again, maybe a child's life will be in peril or an innocent. But if it's scientific research or morality, I think Christensen will go down the route of choosing the research. At least that's how I felt at the start. Well, in my case, and he's fine with that. In my case, I was doing what I thought was right, and I've lost everything. I would never have family, never have a life, or at least not a normal life. Who knows? In KULT, maybe I'll become the head of this cult of.
So you have your watchers.
Yeah, whoever the fuck they are. That was a fun thing. Yeah,
and I didn't want to specify who they are, and in general I've tried to keep most of the supernatural stuff as vague as possible, just because in general I feel like that tends to work better for to really utilize both your imaginations and the imaginations of the listeners to sort of,
especially initially. So no, I think it was all good, and also again it's the classic thing with KULT when you're making aware characters. I think some of the potentials they have can get a bit campaign inspiring. Like the whole campaigns can be made. So I think for example, Hjalmar's one was a lot more grounded in the story. Like him being this doctor who's up to something weird. Like that was a lot more easy to explore. Well, again, partly for fun, but yeah, I agree that I maybe there was a bit like all the mysteries behind my house and the Watchers. That was maybe a bit out of the scope of this particular story. At least initially. No, not initially. At least progressively. Initially, I think the weird doppelgangers worked in well. It seemed. Because what the hell were they? Fucking doppelganger Eden people. Especially who was the weird. Why was my former
auditor,
auditor, like what? Why was he one of them? And because he seemed like he was. If anyone in the campaign seemed like a villain. He seemed like the campaign's villain, in a way. Like, it seemed like he was the leader. To me, or at least an important one of these people. Not that there was really a villain in the story, but he was the only one who ever came across as like an antagonistic character as opposed to a force. So I found that interesting. Yeah,
and I mean, he was also not really supposed to be a sort of named character in that sense. I mean, Gaia is the force of nature, basically, and I wanted to portray these agents that she has as just that, they are this force of violence, of raw rage and just hatred coming for you, basically, and you have to kill them because otherwise they're going to kill you, and that sort of was what you were doing, and so there was this choice of fighting that forever war or surrendering, and moving on and doing something else, like screw the consequences. That was a choice. So I was quite actually surprised in a way that you chose to embrace the duty and the promises that your family had made. But given what it would mean for you, but I suppose it made sense for the character at the time.
I think at the time, I think that's the important thing. Like, I think if there had been a longer campaign, and maybe, for example, similar to how I could have, like, our characters could have affected each other's fates. If I had had time to talk to, for example, if we'd had time, I wanted to maybe have a little speech to Dr. Christensen saying, that thing's not your daughter. It's not your daughter. And that'd be interesting, because obviously then it was, but I was going with the idea that the daughter is a weird homunculus thing. Like, you can't interact with that, and maybe, likewise, Christensen could have been like, no, Coleman, have a life. Have a fucking life, you moron. But I think on the basis that we didn't have time for that, my character was still very much like, he thought great evil would happen. Terrible things would happen if he didn't do what he was going to do. And poor Elizabeth, we liked her, but also we'd only just started. So it was like, maybe she'll leave me one day as well. And again, he also thought there was a way out of it. God knows if there is, but that was his initial thinking as well. Like, surely if I come up with something clever, I can kill them all, and then I can just get back to this task can be done.
You certainly will have lots of chances to kill lots of them. That much is for sure. That's what awaits.
I wasn't even a very good violent character, so I'm
no. But, you have a very powerful artifact, and you have a group of very, very powerful beings around you, and yeah, it seems like you were fulfilling your role quite well there. So that's...
So, yeah, to conclude, a sad journey, I think, for this character. A sad one, but, well, that's KULT.
Yes, but I mean, I suppose one of the things I wanted to kind of show there was the fact that, like, a life of duty to something, of fulfilling your duty and serving something higher than yourself might mean that you have a life that is devoid of personal meaning. But perhaps the duty itself can bring meaning. I mean, that's, I think, how a lot of people who are in similar situations in our real world might look at it. That, I don't have a family, but I'm out there serving my country. I'm protecting everybody, and because of that, it's all worth it, that people might look at it that way.
Double points for Matthias, because you could then argue your big overarching theme of the horrible political instability and the horrors that were happening stems from... you could argue a psychological debate between we're doing this all because it's good, and it's destroying the world and hurting people. And they don't get it. These people still choose to do what they think is right.
Yes.
So, yeah. And both our characters, in a way, did make choices they thought were right.
Yes.
Yeah.
They certainly did.
That's where the whole greater good idea, theme, I feel it comes in a bit. Did your... I don't know, intentions, I was wondering, for our characters, did it change much as we were going, Matthias? Or, like, the things that you wanted to... was there ever a realization, like, this is something I would like to expose them to as we were going?
I think there were definitely quite a few things that I ended up changing along the way, and I definitely... started feeling like I really enjoyed these more down-to-earth situations that you were in. I was initially thinking that, when we have this crossing into the borderland, that would have been maybe more explicit, and you would have been in more like actual, like, violent combat. And I was even at one time contemplating that maybe this failed science experiment, because if you look at the rules, of course, for it, then it actually implies that thing is actually out to get you. So there was one sort of idea I had of, well, perhaps this thing that you've been experimenting on actually is then in the Borderlands and coming to kill you, basically, and you would have this horrific simian creature that's out to devour you, basically, for what you have done to it. I just felt like at that time it almost felt like it would have been too soon, and sort of the idea of this science experiment, there was something slightly hokey about that, that it was kind of too much like creature flick type, 80s horror type thing. A little bit too much of that. So that's why I ended up sort of going in a different way. But and a lot of that came from just how grounded we kept things there in the beginning, and these lovely family scenes that we had with you eating breakfast with the kids and all that. It was like all that together just felt like, yeah, we need to kind of keep things from escalating too far.
What happens in the world when we were finally saving the creature? We disturbed the actual, the people who took it. Like, because we had them like, oh, he's off in bed. But what happened in the world where like we broke down the door and went, we're arresting you? Like, who the fuck was that character? Did you have a character?
Oh, you mean the animal rights activist?
Yes.
Yeah. Well, there is a character there, definitely, but. The thing for me is also I didn't like. There's never been any intention of portraying the animal rights activists as antagonists in any way, because you could argue that they are very, very justified to do what they were doing because of how these poor test subjects were being treated. And yes, it meant that Dr. Whitehead and Dr. Christensen, that they had to deal with a lot of stuff, and they were getting threats and all that stuff. But there is that. I wanted to kind of bring to the table this idea of. Yes, but sometimes people do deserve some of these things happening to them based on the kind of things that they are doing to other, to other people or living things. But it's also not such a simple thing, because Dr. Whitehead was sort of supposed to be the character through which we saw that, because you could see how she didn't seem like she was a bad person necessarily. She was just kind of being broken down by these threats that she was getting and this hatred that was sort of turned in her direction. And it actually ended up seemingly triggering this alcoholic incident.
I was going to say, that was actually my question. Did she actually just accidentally kill herself? Because I also felt at one point it was like, or was she killed by these these animal rights activists? But maybe actually she did just.
It was just a car accident. That was it. So
interesting. Very interesting.
That because I really wanted to avoid any kind of situation where we're somehow portraying the activists or for example the protesters as necessarily being like, there's no one that's really wrong in all of this. It's a lot of people who have real grievances, and some of them are more valid than others, but there is this feeling that we have in society, the temperature, it's turned up very, very high, and everyone is on the edge. And in this scenario, the idea is that we pass across that edge and shit gets really, really bad. And the question ultimately is going to be, can we fix it? Can we avoid it from happening in our real reality? And in this scenario, is there a way to turn it back? And that's not something that we're answering in this particular scenario. That's something for the listeners and for you to think about. What you think is possible there?
But because of how you made that a bit of time pressure for me, that Cadence might be failing right now, her heart might be failing right now, and then I just feel like I didn't have the time really to confront this guy or care about his like mini crusade of. I didn't have time for vengeance in a way, and I don't know if I actually did care about it either, because it was just I mean, I'd
argue that's cool, because I'd argue it's normally the common trope is the other way around. It's you only have time for the vengeance. So the fact that you were so dedicated that we didn't have time. And again, maybe listeners, this is a classic thing of like too much Cthulhu, too much cult, because what Matthias has said is really cool, makes perfect sense, but of course DM Craig was like, but maybe they're actually a weird cult and it's all a front. Like maybe actually you'd find out that like the righteous animal activists were being used by some horrible weird thing that was driving them to extreme. That's why, for example, the way you described like the student protest, I was like, oh, it almost sounds like there's something forced, like, behind it, like making it really bad. But again, the fact that it turned out actually, no, maybe they were completely normal.
Exactly. That's how. I mean, you could of course try to attribute it to a higher power, and there are higher powers that of course are all about violence in society and about having feelings of mistrust towards your fellow man and all that. There's a lot of things to work with there, but I think the society that we see today, that we are in, I mean, it doesn't even need that. It's already there. So yeah. So yeah, there was no higher power guiding the activists there or anything like that. The supernatural part was really, it was about this machine, and of course about the artifact that you had, and then what Gaia had done with this Cadence doppelganger that she had created.
I was thinking about the experiment gone wrong. You were saying that they were that you first were thinking about this idea of being chased, possibly by the experiment, and I was just wondering. I never rolled below 15 on experiment gone wrong. There was always very, very high rolls. Did that in any way affect you implementing that or not implementing that?
Yeah, because I had in the first session, I think I had initially an idea of that what was going to happen was that there would have been, there would have been someone really trying to break down your door. There would have been these massive claw marks and everything, and that was kind of, that was the creature coming to get you, actually. But you rolled really well there, and then I think you had a bad reputation was something that ultimately ended up getting some bad points, and that's the one I chose to then really go on instead. And that's where the whole Jermaine getting fired because the tape is leaked, where all that comes out, being in front of this panel that's gonna take your job away and without any severance and everything. I hope that was some real life horror that you hopefully will never have to face.
Yeah. That was definitely, yeah, my pulse did go up there, and I was like, what can now be important? I'm not going to be able to do this. Can I at least save my daughter? And it was like also kind of, taking away more of the ground that I was standing on, allowing for more obsession.
Indeed. All right. Well, were there any highlights or any memorable NPCs that will remain with you? If you take one thing that sort of one thing or one NPC that you will carry with you, starting with Craig, maybe Mr. Coleman. Was there anyone that you really?
I mean, well, Dr. Whitehead, I think, and maybe I Dr. Whitehead and Dr. Christensen's family, just because I think the other NPCs in the adventure were a little more. Mind you, though, I'd have liked our fun police commissioner man. Now I think about it, he came up at least twice.
Mr. Bergeron.
I'll get Mr. Bergeron. Can you sort this out, Mr. Bergeron?
Yes, of course. You donated to the union, so he had your back. Which is based on a real thing where people make donations to police unions and basically get these get out of jail free cards that they can use. It's a really messed up thing that exists in reality, and that's kind of what I was playing off of there.
I think my highlights, again, because it was only a short campaign, are probably just the 2 times me and Hjalmar adventured. Because again, we only had time to do it twice. Really, that was the initial, kayak trip, which I thought was a great. That was just a great cult. That was a good, you could do a whole good one shot on. You go on a kayaking trip, and then there's this fog, and then oh no, and we had to survive. It was almost for a moment a little bit like Forest of the Damned. Was it Forest of the Damned? Was that what it was called? Is that actually what the adventure was called? The one where we crash land on the island.
Island of the Dead.
Island of the Dead, Forest. Island of the Dead, yeah. Yeah, a bit like that for a moment where I was like, I got injured, and then he had to heal me, and also, MVP, the healing move. My goodness, you just healed the wounds that are so hard to get in the first place. Well, not hard, if you're a mean DM, not hard at all, but we like to play I don't try and give you 5 wounds a session. But the fact that you just healed it straight off, I was like, nice. Cool.
Yeah. That's something we haven't had before.
Yeah, exactly.
Where's the healer in the party?
Yeah. And then, of course, our little... the way that, ironically, the drama of the actual stealing the poor creature became almost a fun... It was almost fun, in a weird way. Oh, no, bumbling through some students. Oh, quick, exactly. Get through the door. So those, I think.
It's almost like some kind of 80s comedy. There's infiltrating a dorm and stealing a monkey. It's like...
Yeah. And again, not like it was silly way, but in that the way our characters went through it and expecting some danger, it ended up actually being almost completely pedestrian and actually not too difficult until we rolled 9s. Just straight up killed.
Even then, it was easy.
Yeah. Oh yeah, it's he's fine. He's not resisting at all. So I think those would be my 2 highlights. Yes, our adventures. Yeah.
Yes. What about you, Hjalmar? Some highlights.
Yeah, definitely. I liked us adventuring together. That was really, really great. And Dr. Whitehead, like, almost more interesting in, like, the personality from exploring her home, even more than talking to her, and the scenes that we experienced, like her dating sites and sex toys, and it's just interesting having this picture painted of a person based on how they live. And there was this really kind of clinical house, cold and steel and glass like, or chromium. It was like, yeah, what is this really? But as for other characters, I really liked Elizabeth and the interactions there as well.
Oh, nice. You see, I also did like Elizabeth as well. I think it was a shame we didn't have time to find out more about her. I think she ended up being more for me, which was good, but and made perfect sense, because we literally just had a first date, and then her life seemed to be completely... It's not like we had time for me to be like, so Elizabeth, tell me about your traumas.
No, exactly, no. She was
maybe she
kind of was this normal, like, lovely person that could have brought you joy and sort of a fulfilled love life, basically. That was what was on offer there. And you were going to go to Egypt and see the mummies and everything.
Yeah, and I think that actually is fine as well, because I think that's the whole point. A more normal character like that, you shouldn't be able to know all about them. Like that, they need stuff to happen before you can develop them. So, and sometimes it's nice to have normal people in Cult, because, you know, I think Cult can... you can look at Cult and assume it's a world where, everybody's going round and there's murders every week and demons down the road. It's like, well, no, actually, Cult is trying to say that for sleepers, the whole point is it's easy to sleep, because actually, if you buy into the illusion, if you do as you're told, you can have a life and you can be happy in it. You know, maybe you're going somewhere awful when you die, but at least in this world, happiness is possible. It's just, easy to take away.
That certainly is.
Yeah.
That certainly is. Yes. Well, I think that's some things that we've covered here from A Hole in My Heart. And of course, you listeners, if you have any questions or anything that you wonder about, you can of course post those as a comment when we post this on social media, or on Patreon if you're backing us there when you listen to this. But I would just like to say what a joy it was to be able to GM the two of you again, and to do something that we'd created by ourselves this time around, instead of one of these big pre-written and published scenarios that we've been working with thus far. And I think I felt very happy with what we created ultimately, and I felt like, especially in the end, I was very, very happy with the choices that you chose to make and the thinking that you had behind it. So thank you both for being lovely players.
Well, thank you. I felt it was a nice, strong scenario, which in the end did wrap up nicely. And bonus points, Matthias, as always. I appreciate the fact that you actually have loads of proper history and locations, and you actually look up where the Oregon State University is and what's going on there in the news. It's really appreciated. Even if sometimes in character I'm a bit like, oh wow, okay, a bit overwhelmed. And I do argue, I did try a few times, like, I want to read the newspaper. What's going on? What's going on, Matthias? So I always really appreciate that your style of DMing when you do that. It is appreciated, the effort you put in.
Thank you.
Absolutely, yeah. I was smitten from the start. I had such a fun time. It just felt like, very impressive that you put all that together and had so much in mind for us for this short run.
Indeed. Well, thank you both, and thank you, listeners, for joining us for this story. And we hope that you will look forward to the next thing we have in store for you. And there's, of course, a lot of dark stories ahead coming to you from us here at Red Moon Roleplaying. Thank you. You have listened to an episode of Red Moon Roleplaying, where we play the scenario A Hole in My Heart for KULT Divinity Lost. We have created this scenario ourselves, and this series is sponsored by Helmgast. The music was made by Atrium Carceri and was used with permission from their label, Cryo Chamber. Check out their website at cryochamber.bandcamp.com or their YouTube channel for some moody dark ambient for your gaming table. We would like to give massive thanks to our champions of the Red Moon, Martin Heuschober, Simon Cooper, David, Julia, Camilla, Bob Lange, Cameron, Antxon, Graham Barey, and Doug Thomson for their generous support. And we would of course also like to thank all of our other patrons. Without your support, the show would not be possible. If you want to support our work, please check us out on Patreon. You can get access to bonus campaigns for KULT Divinity Lost and Coriolis there, as well as get early and raw access to all of our recordings. You can also hear your name read on the show as a champion of the Red Moon, as well as play KULT with us. Most importantly, that support is what keeps the show going, so do check us out there. Thank you again for listening, and remember that death is only the beginning.